Hello, welcome back. I am Pius Kojobaka. Straight to our very first story. The year-on-year inflation has seen a fall for the fourth month to 41.2% in April 2023 from the 45% recorded in March. This has extended the disinflation process since January this year. According to the Ghana Statistical Service, both food inflation and non-food inflation dipped last month. Here's government statistician Professor Samuel Kobneni.
The division that recorded a deflation for the month of April 2023 was transport, with a deflation of 1.1%. This can be attributed to the consistent downward variation that we see in the prices of diesel and petrol that we started recording sometime in November last year. On a month-on-month basis, the division that recorded the highest rate of inflation was food and non-alcoholic beverages, that recorded a rate of inflation of 4.3% for the month of April 2023. This was followed by health and followed by furnishing, with health recording a month-on-month inflation of 2.9%, followed by furnishing household equipment 2.1% for the month of April 2023. We assess the contributions of the 13 divisions for the overall inflation of 41.2% for the month of April 2023. We continue to see the dominance of food and non-alcoholic beverages in contributing to the overall inflation rate of 41.2%. Specifically, food and non-alcoholic beverages contributed more than 50% of the rate of inflation that was recorded for the month of April 2023. Specifically, the contribution of food and non-alcoholic beverages for the month of April 2023 was 50.9%. We identified 7 out of the 13 divisions that contributed less than 10% of the overall inflation. So these 7 out of the 13 divisions, specifically personal care, recreation and others, information and communication, education, health, restaurant, and insurance and financial services. If you sum up the contribution of these 7 out of the 13 divisions, they contributed less than 10% of the overall inflation that was recorded for the month of April 2023. The converse means that 6 out of the 13 divisions contributed more than 90% of the overall inflation that was recorded for the month of April 2023.
Professor Samuel Kobneni there. Now, meanwhile, the Bank of Ghana is appealing to commercial banks to cut lending rates since the country's macroeconomy, such as inflation, continues to improve in performance. Speaking at the launch of a collaboration between Absa Bank and MasterCard Foundation to provide loans to small-scale businesses at 10%, Second Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Elsie Ado Awaji, indicated that the consistent drop in inflation is a sign of improvement in the economy. And Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mark Bedu Abuaji, joins us live on Zoom for his reaction to this latest development. Grateful, Mark, you could join me on Business Live. Now, we are seeing inflation come down. With the downtrend, do you think this is a good news for businesses since high inflation also affects operations of most businesses?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a good news that we are witnessing a decline in inflation. And of course, it's good news for businesses because inflation largely affects both their productive cost and also the consumers' ability to buy goods, because their purchasing power are largely reduced when inflation is high. So with inflation coming down, the likelihood that the demand for goods and services will move up, also the cost of production also go down. So inflation, for me, is an enemy to every economy, and that's why we are all fighting and ensuring that we bring inflation down. So it's a good news for businesses.
Well, it is the expectation of the Bank of Ghana that banks will cut lending rates, as we rightly read out to you, as inflation, turns downwards. Now, do you see that happening soon so that businesses can have access to cheaper credit?
Well, I don't think that the reduction in inflation will necessarily cause a reduction in lending rate, because lending rate is a derived rate, and the number of factors play a critical role in the lending rate coming down. And one key determinant is the policy rate. If the policy rate remains as high as it is of 29.5, we don't expect that the lending rate will come down. What we expect the central bank to do is now respond to the positive reduction in inflation rate and also reduce the policy rate. If they don't reduce the policy rate, I don't think the banks will respond by reducing their lending rate. But if the central bank should reduce the policy rate, then the banks will respond positively and also reduce the lending rate. So now the responsibility is on the central bank to ensure that with all this macroeconomic improvement, with stability in the foreign exchange market, with inflation coming down, there's no justification for the central bank to keep the policy rate at 29.5 or even think of increasing it. If they want to reduce the lending rate, then the policy rate should first come down. And I think banks will respond appropriately, even though we know that prices are sticky downwards in Ghana, that the reduction in policy rate may not immediately result in reduction in the lending rate. But with time, I know there will be some positive response and the lending rate will come down. So the Bank of Ghana shouldn't think that the inflation is going down, so banks necessarily will reduce their lending rate. They will not until the policy rate and other factors also improve.
Come Monday, the committee will begin its meetings. And of course, the general expectations from your side and other business groups are that you're looking forward to a reduction or a better still maintenance. What happens if that doesn't happen?
No, we are hoping it will happen because there's no basis for the central bank to keep the policy rate at 29.5. The reason why they have kept it at this level is that inflation was high. In December, it was about 54%. Now it's come down to 41.2%. So why would you keep the policy rate at 29? It should come down. It's a difficult situation for businesses if policy rate is high. Lending rate would definitely be high. It's difficult for businesses to borrow and invest into the real sector. We want to grow the economy. The only way out is to ensure that businesses have access to funding at a lower rate. That is what we are asking from the central bank. So they should reduce the policy rate in their next meeting. They cannot and they should not even make an attempt to increase it because it will not be in the interest of businesses and the economy of Ghana.
Well, Mark, yesterday, Fitch Solutions projected that we are likely to see an increase in the policy rate. And again, yesterday, the Bank of Ghana gave an indication that indeed, they are likely to increase the policy rate. I just want you to tell me what you intend to do as a business group by way of strategizing in case the Bank of Ghana goes ahead to increase the policy rate.
Well, I think that for some time now, there's been a lot of strategies and cost cutting. There's been a lot of cutting down of production and also trying to reduce costs. So definitely, if the policy rate should go up, which will affect the lending rate, then what it means that businesses will not be able to go to expand or even finance their expenditure. And then that means that activities will go down and the economy will suffer. So now we have been in this system for a long time. So we have ways of ensuring that we are able to sustain ourselves into the future until such a time that things will improve. I said earlier that they shouldn't increase the policy rate. In fact, you can't fight inflation, which is cost push, with the policy rate. And from the beginning of last year up to this time, it's quite recently that we have seen inflation coming down. And it's not as a because of the high policy rate. It's because the supply side has improved and we've seen a lot of food production going up and people are able to buy food. So the reduction in inflation rate cannot be attributed largely to increase in policy rate. It can't tame the inflation. We should look at the supply side constraint, increase production, and also what we are experiencing now is because the pass-through effect of the increase in fuel, the pass-through effect of the other increases has now materialized. That's why we are now seeing a reduction in the inflation rate. Now, with the increase of the introduction of new taxes, the likelihood that prices of goods and services will go up is also there. And the inflation, the reduction may not be as we're experiencing now. The reduction, even though we may have it, will be at a reduced rate. So the policy rate, for me, is not necessarily fighting inflation, but we look at the supply side constraint, ensuring that we tame inflation. It can be a complementary policy, but it should not be the main policy in controlling inflation.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark Bedu-Abuaji, for your time here on Business Live. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, speaking to us there. All right. So let's